man, I go out of town for 1 weekend, and all hell breaks loose. I mean, somebody gets flipped off at the Super Bowl, right? You've got the Susan G. Komen Foundation doing a 180 a couple of times. I mean, what could be next? And then I get home, I'm going through the mail, and what do I have in the mail? I get home from a short weekend abroad, and I look through the mail. I've got Romney, Believe in America. I've got Gingrich is the guy. I've got Rick Santorum, True Conservative. And I'm looking for something about Ron Paul. I don't see it, so I figured, you know what, it's not fair. All this mail comes for Romney and Santorum and Gingrich, but nothing for Paul. So I thought, I'll have Ron Paul on the program on Tuesday. And sure as shooting, here you have it, folks. Congressman Ron Paul joins us right at the top of the hour on the day where Minnesota, Missouri, Colorado, and we're still working on Maine, they are all caucusing and or a primary in Missouri, all deciding where the next potential band of delegates could go. Congressman Paul, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
I understand you had a busy rally here last night in the Twin Cities of Minnesota as you are focusing on the North Star State.
Right, and we had good turnout, a lot of enthusiasm, and we're hoping that'll translate into a lot of votes tonight.
So I'm waiting for my luggage at the airport, and I'm watching CNN over the Syrian massacre. And what this has to do with you shall soon find out. Under the headline on CNN, or I should say the byline on the television screen, it said, "World stands by amid Syrian massacre." And I thought to myself, the presumption here by CNN is, how dare the world not intervene to save the Syrians? I mean, this is how we get involved in this stuff, isn't it? This sort of cheerleading on the part of the press?
Yeah, I was interviewed last night and interviewed just a few minutes ago on CNN on the same subject, and they want to make it seem like if we're not ready to send them more kids and more money and start another war and get involved in a civil war going on there, then for some reason we're not humanitarian enough for them. And I think for those individuals that are so anxious to go over there and settle that civil war, they probably ought to just grab a gun and go over there and do what they think needs to be done. But, boy, I think our policy is foolhardy. We're very much involved already. Now the Chinese and the Russians are saying, look, you don't come in here and do this without us getting involved.
Right.
It just leads one thing to another. I just don't know why we feel so compelled to be involved in all these wars.
Well, one of the reasons we do is because the media love it. What an amazing premise there by CNN. World stands by amid Syrian massacre. It's kind of like the Good Samaritan law on steroids, that somehow it's not good enough that you don't harm somebody. You now have to save the world.
Yeah, and how many people did they save when the communists were in charge around the world, or whether it was in Russia or Pol Pot in Cambodia or China? Hundreds of millions of people were killed. I mean, it was atrocious, but yes, the world stood by. Because they didn't know what they could do or what could be achieved.
Well,
to go into this civil strife right now is going to be a total negative for us, and I just don't think that a president or a U.S. Congress or the American people have the authority or the obligation to go and try to settle all these wars.
Yeah, and worse than that, during the Cold War, you had the dilettantes on the banks of the East River actually flirting with the Castros of the world, far from going in and saving the Cuban people or any other group of individuals under the yoke of communist oppression. They were actually defending them half the time.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden we've got to intervene in all of these other, and as you point out, civil wars, and there's just no way we can do that, and that's been one of the planks, of course, of your platform that is gaining steam. Indeed, a Reuters poll out today showing that Ron Paul is now second nationwide to Mitt Romney with 21%, although we're getting a lot of headlines here in Minnesota from whence this program originates. We're across the nation, of course, but as the listeners know, we broadcast out of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and that Santorum is putting on a late push with the Minnesota evangelical movement. What do your people tell you on the ground with regard to the caucuses tonight here?
Well, the one thing that I hear is that nobody knows exactly what the situation is in the state and the way they run the caucuses. It's real hard to predict because percentage of total voters, it's a small percentage. Once again, it's back to who's going to come out and who's organized. I think if Santorum thinks he can do what he did in Iowa, I think that's not likely to happen. I think that might pick him up some votes, but to pull off a win, I rather have my doubts that he can do that.
And it's a little different than the primary in Missouri, where, again, it's non-binding. There will be no hard delegate awarded, but people can go and they can vote and they go home, a caucus, whether it's Iowa, Minnesota. And Minnesota really does have a screwy system, not just in the methodology tonight, but in the fact that you've got a caucus now in February, and then you've got an endorsement process for the state convention, and then you have a primary in September. For statewide candidates, so it's really kind of screwy.
Yeah, it's sort of a mixed thing.
Well, how do you feel about, let's go over the states tonight, Minnesota, Missouri, as well as Colorado?
I think if we had to put them in order, I think we feel best about Minnesota. And, of course, Maine is going on. We feel very good about Maine and pretty darn good about Minnesota. And in Missouri, of course, because the delegates aren't going to be appointed, elected tonight, we're willing to wait and go for the delegates a little bit later on. In Colorado, it's pretty much up in the air. I don't think we're going to make bold predictions, but we're always hopeful.
At what point we know your strategy. You and I talked about this a few weeks back about focusing on these caucus states where you can get your very, very enthusiastic supporters to go there, stay there, and start to amass some delegates all the way through and into Super Tuesday, then into the convention in Tampa. But at what point does Congressman Ron Paul actually have to come out on top in a state?
Well, I think as soon as possible, and the sooner the better, obviously. But I don't know whether there is a precise date. I think they listed Romney has 100 votes out of 1,144, so there's still a ways to go. But it's coming. It's fast approaching. Things are going on this week, and Super Tuesday's there'll be a few more primaries, and there'll be Super Tuesday. I mean, if you get that far and you don't really show what's going on, you still might be able to amass delegates and play a role. But as far as pretending that you can still win, then I would think by Super Tuesday, you better be winning a couple of these states.
So by Super Tuesday or through Super Tuesday, you need to come out on top in one or two.
No,
anyway.
I would think so, to claim there's still a chance that you can win the whole thing.
Final question for Congressman Ron Paul, kind enough to join us on this caucus day in the land of 10,000 liberals. That would be Minnesota, except for the people going to the caucus tonight, I guess, at least on the Republican side. This whole Susan G. Komen Planned Parenthood thing that blew up late last week, a lot of people are missing the point. Komen can make grants to any group it wants, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice. But what is the federal government doing granting money to Planned Parenthood when so many people have, A, moral objections, but B, even if they didn't, what is the federal government doing giving them money?
Well, that's where the source of the problem is. You wouldn't have these arguments. Everything should be private. And I've always thought even those who are strongly pro-abortion, strategically they're doing something really ridiculous. I mean, we know the government's involved in too much in passing out pills and doing abortions and all this. But to take this issue, which is so sensitive, and force people who feel so dedicated to pro-life, take money from them and give it to an organization that actually commits abortion, I think they've just sawed off more. This thing isn't going to go away as long as the government's involved in funding either birth control or abortion.
I agree. Congressman Ron Paul, always nice to have you on the program. Good luck tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.